Welcome to this episode of Thrive with Us. Today we are talking about co-parenting after divorce because divorce ends a marriage, it doesn't end the parenting relationship. I'm joined today by two experts to talk about this from the psychological and legal angles. We have Michelle Estekantchi, psychologist at Thrive Wellbeing Centre, and Madeleine Mendy, partner and head of family law at Bin Sivan Advocates in Dubai. Welcome, Michelle and Madeleine.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about a really important topic, which has to do with co-parenting after a divorce. And I know that both of you have had the opportunity to sit with people that have gone through the separation and divorce process. And I'm wondering, in your experience, what are the biggest challenges that you're noticing in this process?
I think communication is one of the biggest challenge that I see from a lawyer's perspective. A lot of things are misinterpreted. Some of them are, not just misinterpreted, but they are assumed because of certain behavior, and then it just increases the tensions between the parties. So for me, a lot of it is based on lack of communication or miscommunication.
Yeah, it's so interesting you said that, because oftentimes marriages break down because there's a breakdown in the communication. And then communication is the foundation for everything that we do with anybody. And so the communication styles may not have been effective to start with. And now that divorce is there, there's often a lot of hurt and anger. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of perception that this person is doing this because of this person. And that's one of the biggest challenges. But on top of that, or what comes after that, is the fear of what are they going to do with my child? Mm-hmm. Yes. Because we don't see them as a safe person anymore. Mm-hmm. And now I'm letting this unsafe person, or I'm mandated to have this unsafe person be with my child and influence my child. Yeah. And so I think there's just communication and fear.
Mm-hmm. And I think I'll add to that, I'll bounce back on what you just said, Michelle, in terms of this unsafe person. That's one of the biggest problems we have when it comes to co-parenting as divorce lawyers here. It's parents or the primary carer saying, I don't want this person, and it's generally the mother that would say, I don't want the father to have this level of contact. I don't want overnight contact. And the challenge is to say, often I say to them, well, was he safe before? What's the welfare concern? What is the issue? And often, I suppose the issue is more of a psychological one, but you challenge them in their position because ultimately that's the person they've chosen to have a child with, whether it's the mother or the father. And I know it's often an unpalatable idea, but I say that to my client. I say, look, ultimately, this is the person you've chosen. This is the person that is going to parent with you until at least 18 and beyond, because people always think, 18, that's it, I'm done. Actually, well, life continues. Mm-hmm. There are graduations, there are parties, there are weddings, then christenings, where you have to not co-parent, but you have to coexist.
Yes.
And one of the things I often say to my clients is, look, even if you are separated, and it resonates with what you said, to that child, if you say to them, draw your family, still have both parents. Mm-hmm. So for that child, forever, the family is mum and dad, whether they're together or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. So as you were saying, you maybe have to make shared decisions, legal decisions until 18, 21, depending on where you are. But at the end of the day, you and your ex-partner are going to be connected through your children for the rest of your life. And what I'm hearing from both of you is that a couple of the main things that are coming up are communication issues, challenges that may have been present and may even have contributed to the breakdown in the relationship, but also just perceptions and assumptions. And so what it sounds like is happening quite frequently is that rather than giving one another the benefit of the doubt, there is an assumption that this person is unpredictable, unsafe, there's a lot of fear. And if you are feeling threatened, especially about your child, that's probably going to prompt a pretty intense reaction rather than a response. And then when you have that reaction, you often get one back, and then we end up caught up in this dynamic of, competing or fighting rather than cooperating in the interest of the child.
Very much so. I think often when people separate, they don't make a difference between their identity. Your identity as husband and wife is one, but you also have an identity as parent, and that role hasn't changed. And it's very sad when, because the divorce or the separation has been consummated, then all of a sudden they're breaking their parental relationship, and they transfer the fears or whatever issues they had in the marriage into then the parental relationship.
No, absolutely. And I think it's driven by fear. It's driven by fear. Am I going to lose my child? So one is unsafe, but why are they unsafe? Not because we think they're going to be beaten, or sometimes, but not often. Often they're unsafe because what if they like them more?
Oh, I hadn't
What
thought
if
about
they
it that
want
way.
to be in that house more? And then what if I lose my child? And I think that happens for mothers and for fathers. So the mother is often seen as the one who sets the rules, the strict one, the demanding one. It's not for everybody, but oftentimes. The father is often the one who gets less time with the kids. And so if you see in a marriage that's together, in a healthy marriage that's together, you'll see the father. So I think the Oxycontin is released when kids play with their fathers and when they get cuddles from their moms, and moms are often the ones who are protectors and fathers are the risk takers.
Yes.
And so when we divide those roles and you have a weekend set up, oftentimes dads don't want to have those rules and structures because they want, first of all, they're wired to risk take and to have fun and be adventurous, but also they only see them for a short period of time, and they don't want to have conflict, and they're afraid of conflict. And so it's totally unbalanced. And on the other side, moms are saying, it's okay just to be the fun dad.
Yes.
And now they're going to hate being home with me. And so there's just so many complexities. If you can't communicate about what's going on and stability and what are we going to do at both houses, then it just increases this fear of what's the other person doing, and I'm sure they're trying to undermine me.
Yes, that's it. I never saw it from that perspective, but you're right. We often see it, and I describe it to clients to say, Father Christmas parent, the weekend parent, and often it's the dad, the Father Christmas dad, that pulls out your iPad, pulls out Ferrari World here in the Middle East, pulls out all the activities that are normally seen maybe as unusual, but he will be lining them up all weekend because he's catching up on missed time that he didn't have in the week or every other weekend. And all of a sudden you have a good cop, bad cop relationship that the primary carer represents.
Yeah, and from what I can see and what I understand, that maybe there is a little bit more of a shift. I mean, the dynamic that you're describing, it's something that I've encountered as well. But it seems like more and more people are opting for an even split or a more balanced split. But I would imagine that this good cop, bad cop dynamic is still at play. And if you're involved in that, what do? You either, be the bad cop to make sure that there is some level of rules, that you're instilling the values, that you're doing, right by your child. And then you have that, resentment. You're the one that maybe they're not as excited to come and see, and you have frustration and all sorts of other things. Or you do the same thing. And then all of a sudden, the child is going to Ferrari World like every weekend, having ice cream every night on the iPad whenever they want.
Yes.
It's a very, very difficult thing to manage.
And it's a time bomb because when you then have two parents that are competing on who is the better entertainer, no one is there to discipline, no one is there to guide or to raise the child.
Yes.
And I see that in some cases where children then become the guiding force in the parental relationship. And I often warn my clients about it because often parents undermine, and I suppose it's your field and not mine, but I talk from experience, often parents undermine how children then use that situation to their advantage. If they're able to perceive that in that house I can do this and do whatever I want, in mum's house I can do this, but I know she's affected when I come back at the weekend and say, I've done all of that, and she's trying to compete. Boy, you'll start taking them on all sorts of activities, even in the middle of the week, because you want to compete, and they will use you.
And the child starts to dictate
Exactly.
what the rules and boundaries are.
Exactly.
And that's very dangerous, because what it does is then children don't feel safe.
Yeah.
And what do children get safety from? Routine, boundaries, and knowing that they have a safe, sturdy leader. And all of a sudden, there's no sturdy leader. And on top of that, there's no expectation of the child. So children, I really believe, will rise to the level of expectation.
Yes.
When we expect things from them, they feel good, they achieve, they do well. When we have two parents competing, there's no expectation. They become the dictator. So they're in a house that doesn't feel safe. And on top of that, they might not even prefer one parent, but they'll say, I'm going to go to mom's house, or I'm going to go to dad's house then.
Yes.
And so I'd have parents come in and say, they keep threatening to go. And I will say, good. And that's an open door. They're allowed.
Yes.
At some age, they're allowed. And if that's because it's not it's an empty threat. They're throwing out things to see if you'll then give in.
Yes. And the entertainment role is not sustainable.
No.
It's not sustainable in a parental role on a long-term basis. I've had cases where, because of how long I've been practicing here, where I've seen children grow with the child who's become a king in the house, really, calling the shots. And then when they're getting to that 11, 12-year-old, they say, right, I'm moving in with the entertainer, whether it's the mum or the dad, moving in with the entertainer. That doesn't last a year, because the entertainer runs out of steam and also realizes there are real responsibilities. So either the child doesn't last because boundaries are then put that were not put there at the weekend, or his work at school, his routine, his sleep, everything else deteriorates, where the school then flags it and say, right, what's going on? We need to start doing something. And I had a case like that where we had that situation, and custody was changed over to from the entertainer parent back to who the court felt was the more the court and the school felt was the more reasonable parent. And it's a struggle for the child, because in those situations then the power shifts. And if you have a father in this situation, it was a father who's not resentful, it's fine. But then when the power is shifted, then the legal power is shifted, then the child is at the middle of it. But in an even worse situation, because his contact is then limited with the entertainer in such a drastic way that it's difficult for them to process.
Yeah, and it kind of sets the mother up in that case to be, for the preteen teenager to be very resentful towards the mother, because not only are you not the entertainer, now it's a punishment. It's a punishment. I made that choice. That was so fun. And then the dynamic between the mom and the teenager. What does that feel like as a parent to hold that every day? Now I'm here trying to do the best I can. And now how do I deal with this preteen who's angry at me? And I have a ex who's angry at me. And how do I just keep it all together? And the pressure it puts on parents to survive in this really, really difficult situation, and then parent on top of that, unmanageable. It's just unmanageable. Plus the shame. My child has now chosen.
Yes.
And how do I explain that to others? How do I even explain that to myself?
Yes.
What have I done? And so part of managing co-parenting is dealing with all the emotion that it comes with. And I think I was watching a podcast in preparation for this podcast, and somebody was speaking about all the expenses of getting divorced and co-parenting. And one of the expenses she talked about was her own mental health. And I
Yes.
thought, bravo. She said, because I couldn't go through this and not take care of myself.
Of course.
I need to do this. And it was, one was therapy, but then there was a lot of other things. Like she bought new pajamas.
Self-love.
Because, she said, I wouldn't have done that when I was married, but I just needed to feel good about myself.
Yeah.
And so to remember that self-care and self-love is really important and essential when co-parenting and when going through divorce and when trying to navigate all these hard emotions that come up from every angle of life.
Absolutely. And it sounds like both of you have talked about how the good cop and bad cop dynamic is not helpful really to anyone when it's the same person being the good cop all the time and the same person being the bad cop. And then when both parents become the entertainers, that's also quite problematic. So what do you think is kind of the ideal way to manage in this type of a situation? How can parents manage this?
For me, I'd start, because this is where it starts, right, with the
Yes.
lawyers. I always send them to psychologists. And I said, look, go sit down as a family. And sometimes you might have to bring your child in once you've made the decision to break the news of how we're going to be doing family moving forward. Because then the child understands that you're all on the same page. And it's not through lawyers' letters, and I know I'm talking myself out of money, but it's not through lawyers' letters and fighting it through the court that you're going to find the balance for your family. At the end of the day, we do our work, we shut the door, we move on to the new client. And I think it is in forums like yours where they can unpack whether the resentment from the divorce process or the relationship, but at least move forward as a family and say, right, this is maybe what we want for our child. How do we get there? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? And then also have the child involved in that process.
Yeah. No, I agree with you on so many levels. And I agree with you, and it's so hard when families come in and there's so much history.
Yes.
And there's so much pain.
Yes.
At the end, you see often very angry people. But what's anger? It's pain.
Yes.
And unresolved pain, and so much that they couldn't resolve. And so how do we get from that anger and that hurt to just being able to communicate and putting our child first? And I think one of the most important things, if possible, is to remember there's two roles. One, I'm a mom or I'm a dad, and one, I have a relationship. That relationship might break down, so now let's focus on the child. And let's be respectful, not because I respect maybe the person next to me, but for the child. Let's abide by rules that we make together for my child. Why am I doing this for my child? And I think there's become so much confusion because it's so emotive that the child gets hurt because the child gets forgotten about or weaponized.
Yes.
I'm going to use this child as a weapon because
Yes.
I know it'll hurt you.
Yes.
I'm going to try to take them for the whole summer because I know it'll hurt you. Okay, you took them for the summer. I'm not going to pay
Exactly.
because I know that'll hurt you.
Yes.
Yeah, it hurts each other, for sure. But who it hurts the most, or when we see in clinic or in schools, it hurts the child because the child gets really confused, alienated, and alone. As much as we try to show up for them, it's such an isolating place to be. Why is mom or dad not paying? Why is mom and dad not seeing me? Why are they not showing up? Why are they bringing me back late when I'm going to get in trouble in the other house?
Yes.
These are all the things people do to hurt their spouse, their ex-spouse, the person they were married to, because they get so emotional that they forget how much it hurts their child.
And the children are so acutely aware that that boundaries are being pushed. Maybe not that they're being used, but that the boundaries of the other parent are being pushed. And they're put in situation. I see I have a case where my client says her son knows as soon as he comes back, because he's not able to do homework at dad's, when he's dropped on Sunday, he's panicking and he's stressing because he knows he has to get his homework done on Monday, and that mum is going to have to fuss around to make sure that his homework is done before they start school. And they are aware of those boundaries. We think as parents often that, well, they don't know what's going on, but they are so acutely aware.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even if they don't say anything, they can feel it. And Madeleine, what you were just describing brings up something for me, which is this idea of the transition. Regardless of the custody or visitation agreement, there is going to be that shift from house A or parent A to house B and parent B. What do you see legally in your work, and for you, Michelle, as well? Like, how is that for the children and also the parents?
I think if they are communicating well, then it's fine. But I remember one of the first cases I was involved in 12 years ago was a 2.5-year-old boy, and they were living in the Jumeirah houses, where you have a bit of a walkway from the door to the from the front door to the car, and the mum wouldn't walk the child to the dad's door, to the dad's car door. The dad wasn't allowed on the premises, and the nanny was not allowed to take the child. So they were just putting a little backpack on this 2.5-3-year-old, and he had to walk all the way down. I'm describing it, for me, it's like a long walk, because for such a young child to go and see daddy. And then when daddy finishes, and if he's brought him present, well, he has to handle his little presents all the way back to the front door. And I think when you get to that level, and I see it in many cases, then there's a big issue. There's a bigger issue there. And often, I think in my cases, people lose sight of the children. They really lose sight of the children.
Yeah, I think it's losing sight of the children that makes it the hardest. Yeah. That's when it's the hardest. I think if we look at, like, if we could just dream up this beautiful handover, it's when people can separate themselves as the parent and separate that relationship, in theory. And and the other part is that sometimes people, I think this is really important to remember, is that we can go through really bitter, hard divorces, co-parenting situations that can actually turn into be beautiful, help me with the word, amicable.
Amicable.
Yeah. Where you know, I have had the pleasure, and it wasn't pleasurable in the beginning, but to watch families be bitter and angry and horrible, to where they all, can share, in America, Thanksgiving together.
Yes.
And they can co-parent, and they can feel loved and safe and respected in each home. And how does a child feel respected? They feel respected when they know their parents are respected.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can externalize it a little bit and say, if you go into a school or a shop and somebody's really disrespectful to a parent, children will feel really unsafe. They'll cling to their their parent. That's true even when it's another parent. So if they're doing that to each other, there's no safety.
Yes.
And so when you talk about this little 2-year-old walking that long walk, part of me thought, though, that might have been better than sending them and finding the fight. Listening to the fight.
Yes. And I mean, and that was the solution, but definitely not a child-centered solution. And you have those variables of those where I've seen cases where parents will remove shoes or remove certain clothes and say, well, this is for daddy's house, this is for mummy's house. Daddy didn't pay for these, or mummy didn't pay for these, so these are staying here. I think, well, he's going to outgrow them in one way. Or buying toys. I've seen those where the child is desperate for toys. I had one particular case. The child was on the spectrum, and he would have toys at his dad's house, and dad will give him the toys, play with them, weekends, Ferrari World dad. And then when it was time to go back to mum's, he wasn't allowed the toys. And mum would have an hour and a half of tantrum because he wanted his toy back, and he was upset and obsessed with the toy, and the mummy had to in the week try and find the same toy because dad wouldn't give the toy. And it's so heartbreaking when we're hurting our children to get at the other parent.
Yeah, and I think what comes up for me is that ultimately what we want to strive towards is, there may be two homes, but we're on one page.
Yes.
And I know that's much easier said than done. And some of what you've just shared brought up another question for me that I'd like to pose to the two of you. Have you seen that there has been or there is fluctuations in the co-parenting dynamic? So maybe there can be child-centered solutions, like in the case that you described, where they can put aside their stuff, they can walk or have the child collected, and then maybe have other instances where, sorry, I paid for this, so you get to enjoy it in this house, and over there, too bad for you. Do we see a flux, or do people tend to stay in one camp?
I see, especially here in Dubai, because you have such a discrepancy in buying power and what the primary carer as financial possibility is and what the other parent is. I see that often in the household.
Okay.
In terms of, I have a case at the moment where they're fighting over who's going to stay in this 400 square meter property on the Palm, because the suggestion is the other parent is not going to be able to afford it, so we'll have to buy her a small, still have the possibility to buy, but a smaller townhouse outside of the Palm. And mum is saying, well, no, because the way this house is set up, we've done everything in this house. We've set up slides from the kids' room to another. It's a park for them. And they're not going to want to come and stay in my house. They're going to want to stay with their dad. And you see how that power shift and that dynamic really resonates and creates a big imbalance. And I see that throughout. For me, it doesn't shift to let's work together and make it child focused and let's use that power imbalance. It's not often when they get to us, because when they get to us, really, they're fighting, that you are able to get them to dip in and out of the anger and still being child focused.
I think, yes, I hear what you're saying. And I think in psychology, maybe, we have the beauty of time.
Yes.
So you see people in crisis.
Yes.
And they're coming in crisis and they're coming angry and they're coming to get at each other. And I feel like there are families that I've seen be able to move through horrendous anger and hurt into calmness once they work on themselves or once life happens and time heals. And so in the beginning, it can be so hard that you think it's never getting better. And I'm sure there are cases. I'm also sure that there are cases, and like I say, it's so beautiful to watch it grow into something so much better. So that actually, I think about one couple that I just thought might hate each other till the bitter end. And actually, years down the road, that was one of their biggest supporters. And they said, well, I always have a love for that person.
Didn't see that one coming.
Yeah. And I think, wow, well, it took because oftentimes we're hurt because we did love and care.
Yes,
and we
of
feel
course.
blindsided and we feel so hurt. And that's where people come and betrayed and confused. And so that's where you see people.
Yes.
But when, like parenting doesn't go away, co-parenting doesn't go away, doesn't stop at 18, doesn't stop 25, doesn't stop at 50, because you have weddings, you have grandkids, you have graduations. And so people eventually have to figure it out because they don't want to hold on to that anymore.
Yes.
They don't have the energy anymore. I do think financial imbalance, it's really hard to compete with. And we will see oftentimes here, particularly the way Dubai has been set up historically, is that it's men, it's the fathers who have the buying power, and it's the women who don't, but then it's the women who have the emotional connection. So then to balance that out, they throw more money. It just becomes really difficult, and that would be when you see people.
Yes.
I think overall, though, kids gravitate towards connection. They love money. I mean, who doesn't?
Who does?
But the truth is that kids want connection, and they will find their way to be connected if we allow them.
And they also want something fair. I have cases, and these are not perfect cases. Well, there are no perfect cases, but there are cases where the children are so acutely aware of the proceedings, the divorce proceedings, not so much because the parents are talking about it, but they see the result. Well, one parent has moved out. That parent is living in a smaller accommodation. Why are we staying here and dad is staying in an apartment without furniture? And they are so acutely aware of what of what should be fair and what is not fair, that even if, as you said, as they are seeking that connection, they will point out what they think is not fair if they're allowed a voice to speak.
Sometimes they don't point it out as well, because they say, I like teenagers a lot, and they'll say, you know what, Michelle? I know I'm only going to go to that hockey game, and I'm going to get on that plane only when I'm nice to dad. So I don't tell him what I know he's like.
Wow.
And they'll say, but my sister, she'll stand up. She's always fighting. She's fighting with mom. She's fighting with dad. She's fighting with everybody. And I don't see that working. So I get along with everybody. I get everything I want. I'm the good one. But what are we setting our kids up for?
Yes, that's the problem.
So this was an abusive relationship, and I thought, wow, we are really setting this little girl up to be quiet, people-pleasing, get what I want, take the abuse if I need to.
Yes.
And that's okay. That's what we're modeling. And so one of the things I think as moms and dads who are going through co-parenting and we're angry and we're hurt is to remember, what are we modeling to our children? Yes. And are we modeling that we can buy affection? Are we modeling that, I'm going to tolerate abuse so that I can stay in this big house?
Yes.
And so that and I guess that goes to co-parenting, but also the thousands of relationships that haven't divorced, but they're just miserable together. And they'll probably, I don't know if you'll see them come in and go out and come in.
Yes.
But
I see and more now in relationships where they say they want to be child focused, you have this and you might be able to tell me a bit more about it actually, of the nesting concept, where they are separated or they're divorced, but they keep one matrimonial home where the child lives in, and they parachute in and parachute out. And they live in smaller accommodation. So it could be a studio. I had one case where they were actually sharing the studio. So one parent in, one parent out. Okay. And then instead of improving the relationship, they become detective. Oh, I saw a hair clip that didn't belong to me. You left this. You didn't leave any water. You didn't leave the keys. It didn't do this. It didn't do that. And in trying to be child-focused, nesting becomes a big problem. I'm not a big fan of nesting as a lawyer. And I know it's recommended a lot, so I'd love to hear from the two of you about it, because it's not my field. It really is from psychologist's point of view. But for me, as a lawyer, it does not work because it not only increases animosity, but there's no financial separation. And the problem is when you have a relationship where it's borderline abusive and controlling, well, it remains like that. And you have people that are trapped on a long-term basis in a situation because we are proning the best interest of the child. But you wonder whose interest actually nesting is serving. Because it's a child that doesn't have his bearings are completely messed up. I would love to hear from you guys about that.
I think it's an interesting concept because I think it's one of those things that you read about and you think, oh, the child can stay in their own home. The commute to school is the same. They have all the same activities. Because when you think about Dubai and the logistics, if you have one person living on the Palm and one living in Al Barsha, the logistics is a nightmare.
Yes.
And so when you look at it, you think, oh, that might work for our child and might even work easier for me. But when you're looking at divorce, that fundamentally you're looking at having a break from a person.
Yes.
And so that is, like you say, there is no break. You go and say, why is the water not there?
Yes.
Well, I would think in a divorce, what you're hoping for is you don't have to argue about the water anymore.
Of course.
You want to just take away the resentment. It's never about the water.
Yes.
Right? And so it's about all those emotions. And like, then you get to say, oh, I also wonder about when they find a partner and the investigation that goes on. Well, I saw, I don't know, whatever, a woman's jacket there. Whose was that?
Yes.
Or, all those questions. It would almost be having that wound that never, ever closes.
Never.
And what we want for children is to be around stable, happy parents, either together or separated. So what does our research say? Research says that if it's a safe, calm, loving home, either together or apart, that's the goal.
Best outcome. Yeah, and I think one of the important things to remember is that a home and a house are not the same thing.
Yes.
And so I also agree that in theory, it's an interesting concept. I can see why people might gravitate towards it. But I wonder if any child in that nesting arrangement truly feels at home. They might have the same stuff and wake up and sleep in the same bed. But is it the same home when mom is tucking them in versus when dad is tucking them in? And I wonder if, even though there's the logistical challenges and the downsizing and the financial imbalances and all of these things that we talked about, if it would be better to just have them have two places that feel like home and that be facilitated also by the sharing of things and not kind of having that very stark difference of mommy paid for this is only in mommy's house, or when even if there's a situation where mommy or daddy are okay with them taking that stuff, but the other parent is like, oh no, you take those shoes off here, they're going right in the bag until you go back there. So not having those things and then having two separate homes for the child, to me, sounds a bit more child-centered. And what you said is also very important, both of you. Imagine, like, as an ex-partner of someone, going to bed and waking up in a bed that your partner slept in the night, ex-partner slept in the night before.
Possibly with someone else.
Exactly.
It for me, it's a concept that I can understand why it's appealing in the transition time.
Yes.
Where you don't know how to break it to your child and you don't want to have that time away from the child. I can understand how in the first month, 2 months, 3 months, when you're trying to work with psychologists to find a roadmap for your parenting, I can understand how you don't want to miss out and say, right, we're going to do this for now. Mm-hmm. But for me, it is not a long-term solution.
Yeah. And I think I would say the same for me and for me personally maybe, and also for me as a clinician. And the other part I want to say is that, gosh, one thing I know for sure is that everybody lives life so differently. Mm-hmm. Of course. And that if it's working for you and you really genuinely feel, and you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, but it's working for me. No.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Totally. Good. Amazing. Then it's not harmful to you, to your children. You know in your core when things are working. And so, I always say, as much as you introduce us, these are the experts. I always say, I'm not the expert. Mm-hmm. I don't have the magic wand. I don't have all the answers. Actually, the person sitting in that chair across from me, you know what's right for you and your family.
Exactly. And it can change also.
Yes.
It might work for you today and it might not work. And it doesn't make you a failure for putting your hand up and saying, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. It's not working. The things that made it appealing and successful at first, the variables have changed.
Yeah.
because that's what happens. The only, guarantee in life is that things are going to change, and it's okay to regroup and do it differently.
I think it's essential to regroup and do it differently, especially in parenting.
Yeah.
I think we talked about in one of our podcasts before about how do we parent successfully? It's upon reflection. Reflecting, and navigating based on reflection, because each child is different, each parent is different, and there is no one book. And so the same with this, it's that with co-parenting, it's reflecting and saying, did this work for us? Did it work for our child? Okay. If not, let's move forward onto something else.
Yeah.
And that's not only okay, I think it's kind of mandatory for it to be successful.
It's important because life fluctuates, and the needs are different. A parent's need today will be completely different in 6 months' time. Very often, I do a divorce, and then I say, look, when we're doing the settlement agreement, can we put in the introduction of a new partner? Oh, no, I don't want to hear about that, Maddie. I'm not getting married again. And I said, look, you'll be surprised the amount of people that I have done their divorce for, done prenups, and then sometimes done another divorce. I've been here longer than 13 years, but where I've divorced them twice, but also who have met somebody wonderful afterwards, and you can't be closed off to the new relationship because things change. And I think that's why it's important to be able to have that fluidity and that flexibility, because things evolve.
Just like it would have evolved if you had stayed together.
Yes.
Children, you have a child, different children have different needs, different parents have different needs, different parents have different needs at different points in time, and the same for children. So definitely there is that fluidity, and it's important to bear in mind. And like I said before, and I think the two of you agree, not to see that as a failure. That's just par for the course. It's life, right?
It's life, particularly with children. Look at how fast they change.
Yes.
I always say you can see time in children.
Yes. Oh,
Yes.
And so if that's what we're talking about, a child, like as adults we change, but children change at the speed of light.
Very true.
We have to be flexible, and we have to be fluid, and we have to change, and we have to change our styles because their needs will change.
Very true.
There's something before when we were talking about the nesting concept, playing detective was something that came up. I wonder if in instances like that as well, the child is kind of there fielding the questions. And I think that might also happen outside of nesting arrangements. Is this something that you've observed where there's a little bit of an interrogation in the transition?
Yes.
What did you do? Who was there? What did this person do? And the child, kind of caught in, because they are much more aware than we often give them credit for, and they probably know how something is going to land. Do I say this and have whatever emotional, verbal, behavioral response I'm going to get? Or do I just keep quiet, internalize it, try to keep the peace? Do you see that happening? And how does it often play out when it does?
Yes, I see it happening a lot. And so oftentimes in that case, a parent will come and say, you know what? When they go to the other parent's house, they're drinking all the time, and I know there's abuse, and there's women, and and so when you get the child to come in, it takes forever for that child to trust you.
Of course.
And not only trust you to speak to you, but also just trust their own instinct that this is wrong, and that if I know something's wrong, I can speak about it. Because what will happen then is, look, children love their parents. They love the most abusive parents. They love the wildest parents. They love the most conservative parents. What we know to be true is children love their parents. And so if they're getting interrogated and they're picking up, I'm saying something wrong about my parent, therefore there's something wrong about my parent. Now I'm throwing that parent under the bus.
Yes.
I'm not going to do that anymore. I don't even know what the consequence is, but I know I'm doing something wrong by speaking. So I'm never going to speak about that parent again in any way. So they really then create for their own dialogue, they will idealize the parent. And that is when things, I think, become really dangerous.
Yes.
Because they are no longer allowed to say when they feel unsafe, because they don't know when it's wrong or right and what the consequences are. And they start to get really confused about, why do I love this person who must be doing something wrong? And then what's wrong with me? And so there's so many complications that I don't think I don't think anybody, when they ask those questions to their child, really understand the ramifications of those questions or what those ramifications can be. And so it's one of the probably most damaging things I've seen in children, because it blocks them off from their own emotion and their own ability to trust themselves. And so, and it happens so much, so much.
I see it a lot where children are being used to extract information, but also they're being taught to lie, where the parent will say, don't say that to mommy, or don't say that to daddy. Don't tell them that auntie so-and-so is with us, or uncle so-and-so lives with us. And slowly you have children who just develop an ability either to lie or to be economical with the truth. I remember a case I had years ago where the father had started a brand new relationship. And that relationship had been going on for over a year, unbeknownst to mom. And it's only because she'd come across some material that she thought, well, I'm sure dad didn't buy this. That she then said to the children, right, what's happening? And they came out with it and said, look, he's told us not to say anything, but it's been going on for auntie so-and-so takes us here, there. We are socializing with her. We're socializing with the rest of her family, but we can't say. And you are now setting your children up not only to lie, but also to fail themselves. If something had ever happened to them at auntie so-and-so's house, they can't come back and tell mom.
And to carry shame.
Yeah.
And shame is such a powerful emotion. And probably one of the most self-destructive emotions. I'm carrying shame because I'm going to auntie so-and-so's house and I'm betraying my mom. And if I don't betray mom, I'll betray dad. And so there's no way to kind of recover from that. There's no right way. There's no easy way for the child then to find a path of releasing shame. It's not just shame about keeping the lie. It's shame about, now I've hurt the other parent. I've hurt my parent, the one I love the most.
So they're caught in between, and what it sounds like is this child is not the focal point, that the parents are not on the same page, and that their desire to kind of maintain, and I know that's, I use the word desire, I don't mean that it's something that they're wanting to do, but their disdain for the other parent is so much stronger in those instances than the concern for the child's well-being, and they're so caught in it that they don't even necessarily realize that. So I think, again, kind of zooming out, in line with what we've discussed from a legal perspective, a psychological perspective, nested within our literature as well, the scientific studies, children can do well after a divorce. They can do well in a nesting situation. They can do well in two households. But the most important thing is that the parents can stay as united and as cooperative as possible, talk things through, manage things as a team, because that team, it's changed. We're not romantic partners anymore, but we are still partners in raising this child. And now, as well as, like we said, it doesn't end 18, 21, 25, 50. As long as we're both here, we're both among the two most important figures in their lives. And it's much easier said than done to say, we got to remove our feelings and our baggage individually and in that relationship, but it really is in the best interest of the child and the children.
And I think that's a concept that was left to psychologists to let parents understand and value also, because we work for our children. We do everything. They are our legacy.
Yes.
And sometimes when I read cases, I speak to my colleagues and say, these guys are messing up their next generation. And literally you are. You're setting up sometimes your little girl to accept abuse. You're setting up your child or your son or even your daughter to be perpetrators simply because you want to be right or you want to... I want revenge or I want to show that I'm powerful. And I wonder whether I see you're nodding, so I'm assuming you're seeing that also. It's funny how it's like a highway of cases and emotions and feelings and probably pathologies.
Yeah, and I think it just goes back to what we talked about, is that nobody gets married thinking they're going to get divorced or hoping for that. Nobody has children hoping to mess them up. And so it's like, how do we get lost along the way? And there's no time to sit back and think about, let me heal myself first so I can heal the other person. Sometimes there's no time and sometimes there's no willingness.
Yes.
And so it depends, but also often parents, when you talk to them and you explain the effect that they have on their child or that their behaviors are having on their child, they might regroup. They might regroup and they might make changes because they don't see it.
Yeah.
They don't see it.
The bird's eye view can be helpful. So my last question for the two of you, kind of in the spirit of child-centric and seeing things from different angles, legal perspective and psychological perspective, what do you think children would ask for or want the most in their co-parenting dynamic after divorce? What do you think would be top of the wish list?
Routine.
Respect.
Routine and respect.
Yeah, for me, I think if they have a routine that is similar in both households, if they have boundaries that are the same, it helps them grow. It helps them not to have to think, right, what am I doing tomorrow? Am I allowed to do this? Often where you have cases where in one parent's house, they're in bed at 7:30. In the other parent's house, they're in bed at 10 o'clock.
Yes.
You really see the difference in schooling reports, in behavior when they're in that week with one parent or that week with the other. It's, I think routine is key for them.
And I would say that would be the first one because, but routine in that, the basics, the sleep, the food, the homework, screen time.
Yes.
You know, these are the four kind of big ones, and if we can keep those routines in place, those foundations in place, the other stuff is okay.
Yeah, it's extra.
And then you can try to work on accepting the other parent does different stuff and is different, and that's okay. But that routine. And why I said respect is because I think that level, when you respect the other parent, what you're saying is, I actually respect you as a child. And when you show, you don't have to love the other parent romantically, but if you know that there's a care for the other parent, they feel cared about. Whatever you feel toward the other parent, the child feels you feel toward them. And I think people don't understand that enough. If you have hate for your partner, it's really difficult for that child to feel loved. And you might love them more than anything in the world. But when you carry that hate, all that child feels is hate. And so respect.
Okay. So routine and respect, two of the most important ingredients from the eyes of a child when they're navigating the co-parenting situation after divorce. Madeleine and Michelle, thank you so much for your time and insights today.
Thank you.
Thank you.